shall hear the sound of the cornet, the flute, the harp, the sackbut, the psaltery, the dulcimer, and all kinds of music, shall fall down and worship the golden image. And whoso falleth not down and worshipeth, that he should be cast into the midst of a burning fiery furnace. There are certain Jews whom thou hast set over the affairs of the province of Babylon, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. These men, O king, have not regarded thee. They serve not thy gods, nor worship the golden image which thou hast set up. That verse 12 there, that's actually a pretty good testimony for Meshach, or for Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. It says that they serve not thy gods, nor worship the golden image which thou hast set up. They obviously were different than those around them. The Chaldeans seen them, and they noticed that they were doing something different. They wasn't very happy about it, and they were trying to cause some trouble for them. But just them being willing to stand up and bold to stand up in the face of that opposition put them in a place where God's power could be revealed. Verse 13 says, Then Nebuchadnezzar, in his rage and fury, commanded to bring Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Then they brought these men before the king. Nebuchadnezzar spake and said unto them, Is it true, O Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego? Do not ye serve my gods, nor worship the golden image which I have set up? Now if ye be ready, that at what time ye hear the sound of the cornet, the flute, the harp, the sackbut, the psaltery, and dulcimer, and all kinds of music, ye fall down and worship the image which I have made. Well, but if ye worship not, ye shall be cast the same hour into the midst of the burning fiery furnace. And who is that God that shall deliver you out of my hands? And then in verse 16 says, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego answered and said to the king, O Nebuchadnezzar, we are not careful to answer thee in this matter. If it be so, our God, whom we serve, is able to deliver us from the burning fiery furnace, and he will deliver us out of thine hand, O king. But if not, be it known unto thee, O king, that we will not serve thy gods, nor worship the golden image which thou hast set up. And like I said, that's where the rubber meets the road right there. That's where actions speak louder than words. It wasn't just what they said, but it's what they meant when they said it. They said, we don't have to think long about it. We don't have to be careful about giving you an answer. You know, we talk about that all the time. Be careful what you say, because when you say, you can't take it back. They said, I don't have to be careful. They said, I'll give you an answer right now, and the answer is, I'm not going to bow down. You tell me to take my time and think about it, and if I'm ready, I can bow down, and that'll be okay. He said, I don't have to take my time. It's without question. I'm not going to, and it's not a possibility. So if it be my God's will to deliver me from the fiery furnace, then He will. But if He won't, then I'll die in the fiery furnace, because that's fine too. I would rather die serving God than to live serving you. And that's the situation with the world today. They're not willing to die serving God. In the New Testament, we're taught that you need to fear the one that can kill you and damn your soul, not fear the one that can just kill you. There's so much more to life than just what we have here in the physical. This is but a vapor. It's here for a minute and gone. It's also taught that we're like the lilies in the field. And they'll be clothed in all their splendor, but they'll be die and cast away, burn in the fire. And that would be the same fate for man if it weren't for the blood of Christ. In our short-lived life, once we die, we would get what we deserve and what we got coming to us. And people just don't realize what it is today, what they do deserve. You're not entitled to anything other than condemnation. That's what you're entitled to. But our God is gracious, as Hananiah's name explains, and Mishael, whose name is, who is like God. And there is none like God, none like Him at all. And if we'll trust in Him, then God will help us, just as Azariah's name explains. Then was Nebuchadnezzar full of fury, and the form of his visage was changed against Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Therefore he spake and commanded that they should heat the furnace 7 times hotter than it was wont to be heated. They're going to heat it 7 times more than is ever meant to be heated. This thing's going to be hot. He's mad. They done stood up and pretty much spit in his face. But they knew where to stand. They knew where they needed to be grounded. It's not a matter of being rebellious against authority, because there's no greater authority to be in submission to than God. And so if we're submitting to somebody else above God, then who are we submitting ourselves? Whoever you submit yourself servant to, that is your master, right? Let's trust God and keep Him first. That's what they done here, and God took care of them. And he commanded the most mighty men that were in his army to bind Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and to cast them into the burning fiery furnace. Verse 20 there is kind of interesting too. They stood up in rebellion against him and said, we're not going to bow down to your statue. But yet he felt the need to send the most mightiest men of his army to take them. I think that they would have willingly walked into the furnace, because they were not going to deny the fact that they weren't going to do what he wanted them to do, and there was a punishment from him for not doing that. They weren't going to argue the fact that he had that punishment there. It was that they were submissive to God over him. And so I guess since Nebuchadnezzar felt opposition from him, he felt the need to send his most mighty men, which actually was kind of a mistake when you read what happens to his mighty men here in just a minute. And verse 21 says, then these men were bound in their coats, their hosen, their hats, and their other garments, and were cast into the midst of the burning fiery furnace. Therefore, because the king's commandment was urgent, and the furnace exceeding hot, the flame and the fire slew those men that took up Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And these 3 men, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, fell down bound into the midst of the burning fiery furnace. It was so hot that the men who bound them, the most mighty men in the king's army, were burned up just by getting close enough to throw them into the furnace. At times it's going to be hard, and we're promised persecutions. And I mean, if the furnace is hot enough to consume those that are trying to feed you into it, it might be times that you're going to be facing that opposition. And they didn't know if they would feel the pain of being burned alive in that furnace. Their concern wasn't about being delivered from that furnace. They were willing that if God wouldn't deliver them, to die in that furnace, to die serving God rather than to die serving man. Because when you deny God, you die a death that's eternal. I mean, it's not a temporal death of this physical life. That's what they were facing here in this furnace, to die a physical death. Like I said, our life is fleeting anyways. I mean, in the scale of things, modern man lives an average of, 75 years? I mean, what is 75 years in the greater scale of the world? And then facing eternity. What is your life? How are you going to live it? What are you going to do while you're here? Because every moment you live is gracious God giving it to you. And once you've lived it, you can't go back and take it back. We've talked about it plenty of times in the past. That, a lot of people, you think maybe I could have pretended to bow down to the statue and I'd still trusted God in my heart, but that way I could bow down and I wouldn't have to face that death because, my family needs me and I need to do this and I got all this stuff I still got to do. If you pretend, God's not okay with you pretending to fit in. He's not okay with that. He actually told you to be different and to be peculiar. Brother Kent talked about it this morning. We're strangers and we're pilgrims in this world. We're not meant to fit in. We're not meant to try to fit in.